Welcome, listeners of Ghastly Tales. Unfortunately, there was an issue with one of the microphones in the recording of this upcoming podcast. We did the best we could to fix it, but unfortunately it is still distorted as a result. We will have this fixed for the next podcast, and in the meantime, enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the PodGhast, your source of horror and hilarity. I am presenting this time as opposed to Michael, who's usually the kind of rock or the anchor or whatever you want to call them, words that rhyme with anchor. I'm going to be hosting it this time, and I'm joined by the lovely Mik. Say hello, Mik.
What's up, guys? Also,
Mik.
banker rhymes with anchor, so maybe we can call Michael a banker.
That wasn't necessarily the word I was thinking of, but similar to that. Mik is head of our Dutch division.
Yep.
Which I came up with earlier on. I just like the fact that it rhymed. So tonight, quite recently, we just did kind of not necessarily a retrospective, but a look back at the Star Wars series and the horror elements that were in it. And we only looked at the original trilogy, but there was still a ton of stuff to get through. There was pretty good response to that, so we decided to look at Dune, movie from 1984. We're not going to look so much at the novel or the TV series, really just the David Lynch film and the kind of horror elements that are within that. But before we get started off, it's been a hell of a week. We've lost quite a few pretty important people.
Yeah, we sure have.
Today we just lost Alan Rickman, and unfortunately,
Gruber.
Yeah, and a couple of days ago as well we lost David Bowie, and then obviously Lemmy before that. But funnily enough, well, not funny obviously, but you know, it's a saying. Lemmy had just turned 70, and the other two guys both died at 69, which I find a little bit weird.
It is weird, but well, I think they all lived pretty hard, so.
I guess they probably lived their lives, as you say. But is there not like a 27 or a 29 club, or what is Kurt Cobain died? There's like a whole load of like Jimi Hendrix and stuff all died at the same
27. It's Ian Curtis, I think, and also Amy Winehouse, and yeah, it's a 27 club, and we're now having this kind of 69 club, I think.
Which sounds like a totally different thing when you say
Sure
it.
does, yeah.
So yeah, we're going to get into the talk about the movie now. So this was directed by David Lynch. I'm not a huge David Lynch fan, but I know that you are. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know you're a bigger fan than I am.
Oh, I am a huge David Lynch fan, so you can even say that.
Okay, so I will put words in your mouth then. But yeah, I do really quite like The Elephant Man, but there's a lot of his films kind of grate on me, like Eraserhead, for example. I can't sit through it. Mm-hmm. But my biggest thing is I haven't actually seen Twin Peaks, and a lot of people tell me there's bad episodes and there's really good episodes.
You haven't seen Twin Peaks?
No.
Holy shit.
So perhaps I'm not the most qualified to judge them overall, but just in terms of what I've seen, I've got a little bit of a soft spot for Dune. There's elements that I like about it, and I can kind of sympathise with them as well, that David Lynch is kind of distanced himself from the film.
Yeah, he has, and to be quite honest, I can totally see why. So this is going to be an interesting discussion, I think.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to talk about from that aspect as well as the horror, but because his original cut of it, they kind of butchered it, and then later on they did a kind of director's cut, but he never gave any kind of approval to it, so he put his name down as Alan Smithy, which is kind of the universal used name when you want to discredit yourself as a director. He also used the name Judas Booth as a screenwriter, I believe, which is a combination of Judas Iscariot and John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting that he's distanced himself with it. But some of the biggest horror elements, I would say, are actually things that have been added in by Lynch that weren't actually in the original book. And I'm not just talking about Sting and his kind of weird little blue pants. But I've actually made a list. You said you were making a list for once. I've made a list, but seeing as you made the list before me, is there anything you want to kick off with?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's very fair to say that it was butchered like his original edit, because he was actually involved in the editing process. So the theater version that I watched today, actually, for the second time, the edit was done with him helping out with it. So it's not like they just took it and went on with it without him. He actually was a part of the editing process in the.
They did cut quite a bit out though of the theatrical though. I think I'm sure you complained about it at the time.
They did cut out a lot of stuff, yeah, but it was all with his. As far as I know, it was always with his consent.
All right, okay.
But I'm not completely sure about this though.
Because that's what I was saying as well. I found a version online. There's a lot of like fan edits and stuff done as well. Like there's a 3-hour cut, but there's a lot of like kind of scenes that have been kind of brought back that were previously deleted and haven't been restored. And I know you didn't want to watch it because you thought there was a bit too much filler in it, and I kind of can agree with you. But anyway, let's get on to it. What would you like to kick off with?
Well, I was thinking about because a lot of people say it's like it's his least Lynchian movie ever. It's like it's his most commercial movie for sure. That's a fact. But
did you know it's the only one that actually made actually had like a decent box office? Like of all these films, it actually made a decent return at the cinema, and I think it was in like the top 5 movies at the time.
It was. I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently it actually did all right comparatively, and it certainly did a lot better than any of his other films at the cinema.
Yeah, but I think that's also because his movies aren't particularly for that general.
The mainstream audience.
Yeah, definitely. So that's that weird, and that's why I said it's its most commercial movie, also in the sense of that it's very straightforward compared to his other movies. But
I think what's interesting about that as well is the fact that obviously we just come like straight off the tail or straight off the tails of like Return of the Jedi, so I think the studio were probably looking for something in the vein of Star Wars, and it's really not.
Well, it is to some extent. I mean, I can see the similarities as well, because well, I have to be really honest here. I don't like Star Wars at all, and I also really didn't like Dune. So for me, I think it was basically based on the same whole thing, and I just really don't like this whole science fantasy kind of genre. And even though I think Dune is a little bit more science fiction than Star Wars would be science fiction, it's still way too epic.
It's way too out there. Yes, Star Wars is kind of science fantasy.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of elements of that in Dune because there's some really fucking out there concepts.
True.
Well, I would probably say to start off with, I think the biggest changes that Lynch made in terms of like ramping up the horror factor have got to be the Harkonnens.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of really strange things that he chose to put in, like Baron Harkonnen, who's kind of like the head of the Harkonnen family. Basically in Dune there's like a series of different houses that are all kind of vying and competing for power essentially, and Harkonnen's kind of portrayed as the kind of most devious one of them, really. They're kind of quote unquote the bad guys, but basically the Baron, who's overall the leader of them, is in the book portrayed as like a homosexual sadist, which is quite a kind of elaborate concept before you even get into it, and that's something that actually is taken way out in the films. I think in the books it's kind of place that he's kind of like into like young boys because he sees a lot of himself in them, and he's kind of got this like really kind of egotistical side to him where he kind of almost kind of wants to have sex with himself. He's kind of that
it's very narcissistic.
It's extremely narcissistic, and that's there, but it's something that's like they kind of play it out even more in the film version of it, and they also added like these kind of like pustules to the side of his face that have to get lanced all the time too, which were never present in the book.
No, I think he's like some kind of plague demon kind of.
Yeah, like I think they
really
tried
weird
to make him like the embodiment of like, you know, like if you think about it in terms of sins, like lust and like greed, you know, there's all that kind of present, and they made him. I think they went out of their way to make him the most like kind of disgusting, unlikable character as they could. But they also, one thing that I read, that the Doctor character that they brought in, and this may be the reason that it kind of exists, is the Doctor that comes in and lances his boils is a David Lynch regular, the actor.
Yeah, he is, and it's also it's quite funny to because that scene really got to me because it's a very Lynchian thing he says. He says something about the needles that he's using, but he's saying it in a very Lynchian kind of paraphrasing. It's like almost a small poem.
Yeah.
And it's the only line that he gets to say, but I forgot exactly what it was. But
Well, there's kind of like there's all that kind of strange element as well. It's like he's completely pandering to him as well. It's like, oh my Baron, like how beautiful you are and stuff like that, when he clearly isn't. But he's also surrounded by these really strange kind of assistants where they've like sewed their ears shut and like they've got like straws for eyes and stuff. Like that's all David Lynch stuff, and that stuff is really batshit. That's the stuff you can kind of look at and go, that is David Lynch.
It is, but it's also very inappropriate for the movie. I thought. It makes Harkonnen almost look like a caricature, and in the books, I actually read the first 2 books.
Oh, okay.
When I was 16 or so it's a long time ago. But I always really liked his character because he was indeed a very narcissistic sadist, and it's always, well, when you read a book and there's like a character like that, it's always interesting. So I really liked the Harkonnen guy in the books, but in the movie he's just way over the top for me.
Because he's very, as you know, because I mean, from my reading of it, I really mean to get into the Frank Herbert books. By all accounts, Dune's meant to be a masterful book. Funnily enough, I actually found the audio book on YouTube. It's in 3 parts. Each part is 9 hours. Jesus. So I'm probably going to read it rather than listen to it. But yeah, from what I read, the character in it was kind of very kind of influential and reserved and kind of scheming. Where in this, he's almost a pantomime villain.
Yeah, it's more like something you would see in Mad Max, actually, I think.
Yeah.
And
yeah, actually, he is a bit kind of like a Mortan Joe, or one of the, like, he's, as you say, it's kind of like, is a caricature. But they also, like, they did stuff as well, like, there was other kind of things that, I don't know if this was David Lynch directly, but people seem to claim that it is, to kind of raise the kind of almost, it's like really dark comedy, but it's almost so dark it's not comedy. They did stuff where like he kind of hovers around, but apparently in the book it was kind of like just stuff to aid with his movement. He didn't actually hover completely around, but he kind of flies around, and there's this scene where this kind of young slave comes in, and they all wear these kind of heart plug things, which seem really impractical, like especially if you're going to be a soldier. Like there's just these ring pulls in your chest that you like unplug and somebody dies. But he kind of hovers down over to it, kind of touches the guy up a bit, pulls out his heart flub, and then just kind of like bathes in all the blood. And then a couple of people look on horrified, but most of them are, you know, completely either indifferent to it or kind of enjoying the spectacle of it. And I think that was
used to it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, I think it's maybe a bit almost too overt of kind of going, right, this is what this guy's into, he's really dark, whereas it seems to be in the book anyway, his stuff was a lot more reserved, but you still got the feeling that you did it. But I'm going to be supplying some images up with it as well, because it's a particularly dark scene, I think, that one there. And as you said, probably a bit too dark, and it kind of almost clashes with the setting.
Well, the problem is it wasn't that dark at all, because it's very pretentious.
Yeah.
It wasn't shocking at all. It was just some goofy scene. It didn't shock me at all or something.
Yeah, I think it's almost to that point though where like the elements in it are, like, when I say dark, it's almost like it's a bit too try hard.
Yeah.
Like they've really tried to make the most disturbing thing possible, but because of kind of some of the nature of the effects and the bit there, and the kind of ridiculous over the top kind of like organ orchestral theme he has when he's flying about and stuff as well, just makes you go, it just really pulls you out of it.
Yeah, it's also I think it's funny that you say that, because I thought the soundtrack was pretty horrible, especially like the musical parts. I mean, it's also one of the things, because when I was watching it, I was really focusing on seeing what was similar to other of Lynch's movies, and there is a lot of drony atmosphere sound going on, which really reminded me of his later works and also his earlier works actually. But
is it a returning composer? Is it someone that's worked with Lynch before? I should have checked that.
No, it's not. It's Lynch always works with Angelo de Badalamenti, and I think he didn't for this one.
Right. Yeah, it is kind of, I think, because there's like hero themes for like Paul Atreides, which is the main character and stuff as well, and it's not anything particularly memorable. It's kind of, but I think the Harkonnen one does turn up a few times, and it's particularly ridiculous. Another one that I thought that was really ridiculous was the scene where they had oh, what's his name? Is it Thufir Howard? The I don't think he's a mentat. There's these guys called mentats who are kind of like the like in June they've completely got rid of computers, so like you've got like human minds that are kind of accelerated to a point where they do all the kind of great computations and stuff. But they've got one of him as advisors being captured by the Harkonnens, and the Harkonnens poison him, which I believe they do in the book. But they don't tell him that they've poisoned him. They just basically do it that if he ever tries to escape, he won't live. But they physically tell him in the film, and he says that in order to get the antidote, they bring out this ridiculous apparatus.
Yeah.
There's a cat with a rat strapped to it, and
Yeah.
they tell him he's got to milk it to get the antidote.
Yeah, I really don't know where that came from.
But you can tell, I mean, that was something apparently Lynch added in, and again, it just feels like another one of these unnecessary attempts to create this kind of dark fantasy thing that just looks ridiculous. I mean, it's literally like a rat strapped to a cat with like a fucking pink bulb on the top of it.
Yeah, it's in a cage with it's got this kind of leather harness that he's hanging in, and he has got the milk in. And I really don't know what the fuck that was all about. But I actually liked it though. I mean, it was so weird. I thought
It's so out there, it was unreal. And I think that's one of the other bits as well. Like obviously the Harkonnen are like the space gingers, all of them. And Sting plays his kind of nephew, who the Barons kind of quite clearly got some kind of. I think again this goes back to this thing we were saying about the fact that he's really attracted to his younger self. I think he's got a great attraction to his nephew.
Oh yeah.
And that kind of
really
comes.
wants to hit that.
And that's obviously why he's walking around those ridiculous blue pants. But like, there's another thing about it is that clearly Sting just seemed to have a field day making this film. Like, he's just so ridiculously overacting in it.
Yeah, but he's really into it though. I mean,
Yeah.
I really like Sting in this movie. I don't think that's popular opinion, but he I don't know, he there was a lot of very unmemorable acting in it, and Sting at least was something to look forward to, because he was fun to watch at least.
There's so much scenery chewing as well, because you've got like Jurgen Prochnow, who kind of does get a relatively big role as kind of like the head of the Atreides household, but you've got Max von Sydow, who's only in it for like 15 minutes, and then gets killed off screen, and then Patrick Stewart as well, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, who is absolutely horrible in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, he really is given practically nothing to do. And there's a lot of other people who you kind of know their faces but can't particularly put a name to it. But there's a high caliber of acting talent in this, and a lot of them just are really terribly underused. I don't know if it's the script or whether they just didn't believe in the project or whether it was the direction. They just don't seem to come out. But I can't for the life of me remember the name of the guy that played Paul, the main character, but he's a main character in Twin Peaks, isn't he?
He is. He's Calum and Mik.
Yeah, that's right.
It's really easy to remember for me, because for me, there's of course Blue Velvet, which is a very good David Lynch movie.
Which I haven't seen, which is another one on my list that I do want to. I'll maybe appreciate Lynch a bit more if I've seen a bit, but the handful of ones that I've done, a few of them I've got issues with. But yeah, I know I maybe shouldn't criticise them as much as I do.
Which one did you see? Because that's important.
Elephant Man and Eraserhead is the two main ones I can remember, and Mulholland Drive's Lynch as well, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I've seen Mulholland Drive as well.
I loved it, but I've actually never seen Elephant Man, and that's funny because I've heard that Lynch was chosen to direct this movie because the guy who was doing it, who was producing it, saw Elephant Man and thought, okay, we're going to get Lynch in.
Yeah.
But it's actually the only Lynch movie I have never seen, so I don't know.
It's really restrained, and you wouldn't actually know it was a David Lynch film, and that's possibly why I like it, but I think it's really well and sensitively handled, which is like, I mean, had he gone to the extremes that he goes in Dune and The Elephant Man, it would have been a totally different kettle of fish. Because in this movie, you really fucking turns the batshit taps to 10.
What in Dune, you mean?
In Dune, yeah. Not in Elephant Man.
No.
I'm trying to. There's a couple of other things as well. There's the Bene Gesserit, which are the kind of weird bald women.
Yeah.
Who apparently weren't bald in the books. That was another choice of Lynch, which a couple of people seem to have issues with, because they're supposed to be like top seductresses. You know, they're supposed to be like completely proficient in the art of seduction,
Yeah.
and I don't know how successful a group of bald women would be. No, hey, no qualms, or I'm not. You know, if people are into that, or if people are bald, no offense to them, but you know, you would think that generally speaking, with their hair, they might be minorly more successful.
But that's also one thing that really that I found really particular about this movie is that it's completely sexless. There was like a lot of David Lynch's work is really sensual in a very dark, twisted way, but there's also always a lot of sexuality going on. Um, and in this movie, there was almost none. Not even Baron Harkonnen, who is supposed to be a gay sadist. Uh, you see him lusting after some boys a little bit, but it's completely downplayed, and that's for Lynch. It's really weird because he usually he's all over that.
Well, they're the only kind of bit in it is, I guess, Paul and Shani. But that you can kind of tell that that's maybe been slightly added in just to, you know, just to fill up the main character needs to have a romance quota.
Yeah, but there's absolutely
But
no chemistry there.
no, there's not. And I don't know if that's down to Sean Young as well, because I know some people have got issues with Sean Young in Blade Runner, and by all accounts, he's also mental in real life. But I've always found Sean Young to be like quite a. I don't want to say understated because she's not, but I've never particularly found her to have a great presence. She's very attractive, but even in, I did think she kind of worked in Blade Runner, but she's not like she's not particularly captivating in terms of her performance.
No, not
And
at
in
all.
this, she's really in the background.
Yeah, well, and that's one from the movie that a lot of people are really into the background. There almost is no foreground except for Harkonnen himself, who is there, and everything else just a bit. I don't know. They're just. It's almost like they're doing their day job. It's not like you're watching a real epic.
Yeah, no, I'd
That's
agree with you.
what I felt.
Yeah, I know, which is funny because obviously they worked on a relative low budget, and it's really kind of meant to be an epic scale film, but at some points of it, it does feel really low budget. I mean, really, that scene that we were talking about earlier on where Baron Harkonnen's getting these lances boiled and kind of flies about, it couldn't feel like any more of a set. You know, when he flies up and it's like they've got like kind
Yeah.
of lights on the ceiling, and actually the room stops when he flies up after about 8 feet. There's
Yeah.
like no walls anymore, and you're
Yeah.
kind of like, what the fuck room is this?
Yeah, and that's also very interesting because Lynch and perspective are two very important things, and Lynch uses very weird perspectives in his movies, and also very how do you say it? He uses atmosphere through landscapes. So there's always a lot of landscapes, a lot of scenes of empty streets, of mountains, and stuff like that.
Sand
And
dunes.
in this case, sand dunes. Yeah, and in the beginning you saw some sand dunes, and I thought, okay, yeah, this is pretty Lynch because he was really into that. But then you get all the interior stuff, and it's really boring. The camera work is really boring. There's no weird angles, and
A lot of it's really functional. It's
Yeah.
like purely. I think
That's the
it
word,
might
yeah.
just be because they've got to tell so much in such a short period of time that there's very little time to actually kind of hold and kind of linger on anything. You know, everything's boom, 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 keep going the whole way through it. And I
Yeah.
think, as you say, that does come across in the cinematography.
yeah, and that's also completely not Lynchian at all. Because if somebody is really into lingering, it's Lynch. You know.
Yeah,
So that's also very weird because there are a lot of elements in the movie that you will see in other Lynch movies, and I've written a few down. Um, like it's all very industrial. And that's one of the things that I like. There's a lot of shots of machines making weird humming noises, and there's actually even a ventilator shadow in it, which is basically in every Lynch movie. There's a ventilator going on, so that was fun to see. So you can see like tiny little sparks of Lynch in it, but they get drowned out by everything else. And it's a very, very weird thing to look at if you're really into Lynch. I think.
it's funny actually because it's something that you feel at points he's definitely tried to put his stamp on, and it just hasn't worked out. And it's funny from the point of view that like he just doesn't feel like the right director for this project.
No, that's definitely true.
Though I think he could have been an interesting director for an Alien film.
Well, I think the problem is, I think he could have been a good director for this movie if they would have toned it down a lot. So, there's a lot of background information that's actually completely unnecessary. Because a good David Lynch movie doesn't explain a lot. It's just, it really leaves to the viewer to find out what it's all about. So, why the fuck would you want all this background information from the books if you can just show what's happening? And
I think that's the problem. And then, like we were saying earlier on, obviously it comes hot off the heels of Star Wars, and at the start of every Star Wars film, you have the title crawl that lasts, I don't know, a couple of minutes, and sets the scene perfectly. And then after that, you don't need a shitload of exposition. You're able to kind of go with it. Whereas this, they did add in the stuff with Virginia Madsen, who's the kind of Emperor's daughter, and she's now got this kind of weird disembodied head.
Which was actually very Lynchian, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay, so you think that was maybe some... Because I thought... I don't know if that was in the theatrical cut or not.
It was.
Right, okay. But that's something that they've obviously... That was maybe his way of trying to build the universe, because it is quite a complicated universe, and I think it is a big undertaking. Like I said, I haven't seen the TV series, but I imagine that format would maybe work a lot better for Dune.
Well, I don't know if it's that complicated. I mean, in the books it's complicated, but you can... thing is, you could have made a movie where the fans of Dune that already read the books would see a lot of hints at what was actually going on in the book, and you could but besides that, you could also have made a movie that's completely accessible for people that don't know Dune without all the background, because in the end what you see is this guy, and he goes to a planet, and then he conquers some sandworms, and then he goes after his rivals, and that's basically it. So it's as a plot, it's not that complicated.
I suppose that's true when you distill it down to. But what I thought was kind of interesting is, now I don't know how she's portrayed in the book, but I thought one of the particularly hammy characters in it was Paul's sister, who's this kind of like artificially aged super child. Who kind of turns up at the end and is the one that kills Baron Harkonnen, and she's been redubbed with like a grown woman's voice. And I think she's supposed to be this kind of like really mentally proficient character with kind of psychic powers, but it just comes across terribly.
It comes across like she's fucking insane.
Yeah, and it's really creepy as well, because it's this really small child in this black robes, and she kind of she pricks Baron Harkonnen with this little needle thing that they have, and then that like sends him flying away off out of like a hole in the wall, and then he gets eaten by a sandworm. And I know you don't like Star Wars, but it's just like in the scene in Return of the Jedi where Boba Fett flies off, and the sarlacc that he flies into looks almost identical to the sandworm. So I don't know if it's any kind of nod to that, but that she's like, in terms of horror elements, she's like needlessly over the top in terms of how much of an attempt they've made her to be creepy.
Yeah, it's almost weird because it's a complete shift in tone. Yeah. And if they would have gone for that tone in the entire movie, it would have been awesome. But
well, that's the funny thing, because it happens at the time where you've got like, all the Fremen, who are the kind of local people on this planet, attacking the palace, and you've got this great big kind of orchestral build up, all the goodbye, and then all of a sudden you cut to this freaky little fucking girl with blue eyes, that's just murdering adults.
Which was, by the way, much more interesting than the whole Paul training his army kind of.
That's right.
Because that was really ridiculous.
They've got these they've got those little sonic things called the weirding modules, which the idea is like they kind of they shout and it's sonically amplified. Now that was an invention of Lynch as well. I believe, like in the books, they've got some kind of kung fu.
I believe it was partially invented by Lynch. I think it was in the books, but very downplayed.
Yeah, but I think the actual physical devices they carried were Lynch thing. They carried these little kind of boxes, and then they shout, and then that blows shit up.
Yeah. Also, they were attuned to their guns, so they would shout something, and then the gun would fire.
Yeah, but it was genuinely, it's a bit of a strange one. But yeah, I think there's quite a lot of examples. That one other thing I was going to say is the test that Paul, the main character, goes through, the what's it called, the Gom Jabbar test, where he puts his hand in that box.
That was pretty cool.
And he kind of like, I don't know whether there's, I think there's actually physically nothing in the box, but it's like a mental test of acuity, and I think men are always meant to fail these tests, but it's only women that seem to be able to pass them.
Yeah.
And basically they hold a kind of like poison needle to his neck, so if he pulls away, they'll kill him. But essentially he she psychically makes him feel that like all the flesh in his hand is burning off.
Yeah, she does.
Which, is that in the book?
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's actually quite a strange scene, but
I
it's
like that
kind of
scene,
one
though.
of the few moments of intensity which they actually do stop to focus on something.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, because there's a lot of things are meant to be intense in a movie, but they aren't at all. Like the battles and stuff, they're of course meant as a climax, but
I think what hurts them the most is the fact that for the most part the effects have aged very badly.
yeah, that's also true, of course. But they could have done without the effects entirely, probably.
That's true. I think some of the sandworm shots do work quite well, and it is an interesting landscape. Arrakis, a sand planet where it's completely inhospitable. Yet there's a kind of this community lives, and the whole reason they've kind of come to this planet is because of this thing called the space melange, which is something that if humans eat.
I can't stop laughing at the spice melange.
I know, it's just a ridiculous name.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably why they pretty much only call it spice. I think don't know where the hell melange comes from, but
You know what melange means, right?
yes.
Okay, yeah.
So I think it's I don't know. So the whole thing's kind of the whole thing's kind of based around the spice and the fact that there's this entire society has been set up where the spice allows people to do various things. Like I was saying, you've got like these mental computers and stuff like that as well. The other thing at the start of it, they bring in this character called the Navigator, who is like this kind of, he's not an alien, but he's as alien as you get in this film, and he's kind of like a really mutated human who over the years has evolved into this kind of hovering big blob that are capable of, like,
you can call it evolved, but
yeah, that's true. I guess kind of physically devolved, but mentally they're kind of these huge creatures that are capable of helping ships navigate through space by using this. I think they kind of use like warp travel, kind of like Star Trek, kind of.
yeah.
But they need
what they
these
actually do
creatures
is
to help them.
They fold
Fold space.
Space-time continuum,
Yeah.
so that you can just step in.
But they need these kind of the spacing guild, they're called, in order to do it. Otherwise, they would just disappear. I think they weren't in the original book. I believe they were in a later book, and I think David Lynch kind of incorporated them into Dune and kind of enhanced certain features of them.
Yeah, he did, but I think that was actually a good choice, because I thought the Navigator was one of the most interesting things in the movie.
From an effects wise, I think I think it happens quite early in the film, and it does. I think it does set the kind of scene for how kind of like out there this version of Dune is. You know, that quite quickly happens, and immediately you see, right, we're not dealing with just, you know, regular people walking about.
No, but that's one of my gripes with the movie is when I saw that scene, especially with this entourage, which are basically almost Cenobites from Hellraiser. That
Yeah,
really
but the
fucked
sweeping
up.
brushes as well,
Yeah.
for kind of no real reason.
It's really fucked up, and then you think, okay, this is going to be a really cool movie, and then it degrades into a kind of Star Wars clone after that anyway. So they kind of set this tone for a very bizarre, out there movie, and then what you get is a mediocre Star Wars, and I really even like Star Wars.
And I think that's, you know, I think that is kind of indicative of those scenes later on with the Harkonnens and stuff, how ridiculously out there. They try to go back to it later on, but it's a step too far, and
Yeah.
it just kind of gets a bit out of place, especially with that. But yeah, I think the Spacing Guild is quite an interesting addition to it, and like I said, I don't know how much of that is down to Lynch's influence, but they are very grotesque, so it makes me think that he probably had something to do with it.
Yeah, it's a shame that they didn't really manage to get that tone right, because I think it's also a problem for me with this movie. It doesn't really have a very um, consistent tone in what it's trying to do. It's basically all over the place when it comes to that.
I think so. One thing I forgot to mention actually, the bit earlier where or sorry, at the end where Paul's sister kills Baron Harkonnen. There's like, I don't know if this was in the theatrical cut, but in the extended version I saw, there's like a 3 or 4 second slow motion shot of her swaying around with her eyes closed, smiling about the fact that she's just killed him. That's really creepy.
It's in the theatrical release as well.
That's another like weird tone because he goes flying out and gets eaten by the sandworm and she's standing around dancing, and then the next thing they're kind of in the palace talking about politics. That's a really weird note.
It is, but it's also one of those things that are pretty much David Lynch, and it's because we're talking of course about the horror in this movie, the horror aspects, and for me, David Lynch's movies, especially stuff like Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway and
Blue Velvet, maybe.
What, sorry?
Blue Velvet probably as well.
Yeah, but for me, those are real horror movies. They're the movies that scare me. I haven't seen a horror movie in years that scared me. But
you haven't seen the new Goosebumps film?
Oh yeah, it was horrible. It was horrible in the sense that I couldn't sleep for weeks. It was so scary. But no. But the thing is, David Lynch is really good with atmosphere and really good with building up tension. Those are basically his two main selling points, and neither of those are in this movie, which is weird because if they would have just focused on this very barren, uninhabitable desert planet and all the weird shit going on there, you could actually make a very scary movie. But it's all very matter-of-factly. They just go there and there are some sandworms and oh yeah, they're dangerous, but nobody really puts any attention to them actually.
Yeah, it's kind of one step to the. I think that's the sandworms are kind of placed in as being, such a terrible destructive force and the main reason you can't really tame Arrakis. And then Paul gets a couple of ropes.
Yeah.
And then I know he's supposed to be the chosen one, but with a couple of ropes and some hooks, he's solved the entire problem.
Yeah, but it's funny if you look at that compared to Tremors. Because Tremors is one of my favorite movies, by the way.
That's great.
They're much smaller, but they're a real danger. They're a real threat in that movie. And in this movie, they don't come off as a threat. They get introduced, and then in this one scene where they're mining spice, and and when they mine spice, and there's a sandworm coming because they like the vibrations of the spice harvesters. There's a ship that comes up and they just lift the spice harvesters until the sandworm is gone, and then they just go on.
And but that scene more than anything is used as a way to show the Duke, like the head of the Atreides, as being a good guy because he goes down and saves them.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be this moment of the incredible destructive power of the sandworm, but that almost takes like a side note because the film immediately switches tone and goes, "Oh, good guy Duke."
Yeah, good guy Duke. He gets them into a plane and then they fly off, and then the sandworm eats the harvester
and nothing of value was lost.
No.
Had it killed a bunch of people, I'm not promoting genocide, but I'm saying that there might have been some emotional impact there had they not managed to save them all, and then you might have actually thought, shit, these sandworms are a problem.
Yeah, it's completely, it's like, oh, it's like a nuisance, like I don't know, like when a tree falls over and you just say, hey, watch out, and then the tree falls over and somebody steps aside and nothing happens.
Yeah. Or, that way where, it's like, I think it's that classic Buster Keaton sketch where he spends forever building his house and then the front of the house falls down and then he manages to survive because he's just standing in the perfect spot where the window is.
Yeah, exactly. It's got no impact at all.
But it's funny. That one other thing I thought creatively is they've got the kind of like premium kind of like soldiers that are supposed to win it. I think the Sardaukar or whatever they're called, who are supposed to be like the most scary soldiers in the universe that the Emperor sends. They're done in a really weird way, and I don't know if it was again this kind of post Star Wars thing where it's like we've got to have all our henchmen with their faces covered, but they're just like guys with radioactive suits on, with green lights on it. It actually reminds me of when Marty McFly in Back to the Future is trying to scare his father with a tape recorder. That's what they looked like.
Yeah,
It's a really weird choice.
it is. I thought the entire uniform department was really weird. By the way, it was. Like I said, I liked the how are they called, Spacer Guild.
Yep.
That's also that really sounds like something you would come up in like middle school.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Spacer Guild, like their entourage is really cool, and I like the psychic women outfits.
The Bene Gesserits.
Yeah, those were cool, but
The cowls were interesting, but I still think they should have kept the hair.
yeah,
I think they were trying to make them like female monks, and it was. That must be where the baldness comes from.
from like this guy. But then there's also like a lot of the Harkonnens have got this like
Weird cut down the middle.
yeah, bald.
I think that, funnily enough, that only seemed to happen to the what do you call it? The soldiers. I think. I don't know if that was a way of like. Mind you, I think the slave guy might have had it that had his heart plug pulled out. But yeah, like all the Harkonnen stuff is just like we said, really overtly grotesque. Like, there's Fide, who's the character that Sting plays, but I can't remember what his brother's called. But there's a scene where he's like eating, and then the Baron comes down, and he's like touching the guy's face, and then he's got like bits of like chicken and stuff falling out his mouth. It just feels like unnecessarily grotesque.
Yeah, it was like almost like this kind of medieval.
Yeah,
kind of
with
thing.
like a big chicken bone types. Yeah, no, it did feel like the kind of old school kind of corrupt family and power type thing.
Yeah, but then not really working.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. But is there anything else you want to say before we maybe wrap up?
Yeah, we were talking about these female monks, and I think there's a very matriarchal feel to this movie.
Like the power of women.
Women are obviously very powerful, and I think that's also I think Lynch might have emphasized that a little bit more as well, because that's also a pretty Lynchian thing to do. His female characters in his movies are always very influential, and I think that was pretty cool about. I like that about Dune. That it was a very the balance between the sexes was really weird, and I like that because that gave it a pretty otherworldly feel, and also very. It was a nice detail, I thought.
Yeah, I think the only what I thought was interesting is obviously you had the Bene Gesserits that had a lot of power. You had Paul's mother that had quite a lot of power, and then you had his sister. But what was interesting is you had Shani, who was his, I guess partner, I guess from the Fremen, who are the people he meets, and she is a kind of a warrior. She goes out and fights, but she's actually a lot more kind of two-dimensional and put back when you could have had this warrior woman that you would have thought he would have exaggerated it a bit more.
Yeah, but maybe that's also pretty cool.
I don't know, but I just feel she was maybe a bit of a missed opportunity. They could have done a bit more with her.
Yeah, she was definitely a filler character in the movie.
And then obviously like the biggest filler of all, which is interesting that she's the one that does the voiceover introduction, is the Emperor's daughter, or the princess.
Yeah.
Who he basically, Paul turns up at the end and says, by the way, I'm going to just marry you so I can get on the throne. But this is, you're not getting a say in the matter, and I'm actually really going to be married to her.
But that's also a recurring theme, because you hear the Duke also like reminiscing
With the concubine.
Yeah, but that he should have married his concubine instead of this girl just to get into power. And of course, it's that's also quite weird. Like usually, women marry men to get into power, and it's also a very different approach.
Yeah, no, it's again. I don't know how much of that is in the original novel or something that's
Me neither.
been turned round, but yeah, no, I think that was mostly what I wanted to say about it. I dare say we probably missed some points out. Is there anything you can think of before?
Yeah, the thing is that when you look at the Harkonnen, that's a very patriarchal house.
Yeah.
I mean, almost literally, because the leader, he doesn't like women.
I don't think there's any woman portrayed.
There are no women in the whole Harkonnen house in the movie. No, and then you have. So it's also very cool that, at least cool. It's interesting that the ultimate bad guys in this movie are like this extremely patriarchal society, and all the and also because Paul is really he's with his mother the entire time in the movie.
Yeah, yeah. She's kind of because his father dies fairly early on. Oh, spoilers, but yeah. No, she's the one that kind of shapes him and does all the training with him, and she's part of this kind of outward society. It's interesting for I guess it's her as a character. That she could quite easily be this totally sideline character, but she's not. She's quite a big important role in it.
Yeah, she has, and she was also one of the few good actors in the movie, I thought.
Yeah, no, I think she probably had something to do. Whereas I don't know, I'm kind of torn with Jurgen Prochnow on this movie, or whether I liked his performance or not, because I think he put in quite a solid performance, but again, he didn't have too much to do. He was really just kind of, for the whole time, it was like, here's this good guy with kind of, absolutely zero issue. Like there was nothing bad about him at any point. He was kind of like this purer than pure, and
completely
I guess
one-dimensional.
And then again, that's I guess from that point of view, and then obviously he's supposed to be like the kind of the foil to the Harkonnen, who are the complete opposite end of the spectrum. But yeah, as a result, there's kind of there wasn't anything he did at all. He was being given control of the spice production in Arrakis, which is a huge big thing, but you never got this feeling from him that he was excited by the the kind of monetary gains he would get.
But I'm almost wondering if that was intentional.
Mm.
If you look at the role of women in this movie, it would not surprise me at all if it was just a big fuck you, because he's like this typical. He's like the empty-headed male protagonist that, he's just there to carry the story forward.
And a lot of the plot as well is accelerated and brought on by kind of planned by women too.
Yeah.
And the Bene Gesserits particularly are the ones that are scheming a lot of it.
And his sister who actually gets to kill Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah, which is again a really weird scene, but yeah, I think it's quite interesting. There's a lot of really strange, particularly horror elements in this. Definitely considering this is only one film compared to the entirety of the Star Wars trilogy, which we managed to speak about last time. But so, what did you think of the film overall? Is it a bit of a guilty pleasure for you, or do you completely hate it, or?
Well, if I had to choose between this one and Star Wars, I would definitely pick this one, because there's a lot more interesting stuff for me going on. Because it's weird and it's bad. It's a bad movie, but it's weird and there's some weird stuff going on, and it's confusing, and it gives you something to think about. And for Star Wars, for me, it's just it's very straightforward, and I think I would actually like to watch Dune again, just to see, especially after this talk, just to go back on some of the stuff we talked about and just see.
Maybe try watching that extended version that I watched, the 3 hours. See if you feel that any of the extra material that's added in is worthwhile.
Yeah, I might.
Because there's a deleted scene, for example, where they find where he comes back across later on the guy Thuther Howard, or I think his name was, that had been kidnapped and brainwashed partially by the Harkonnens, and he kind of pulls his heart plug out and stuff rather than killing Paul.
Okay.
That he's tasked to do. So that's stuff that's added back in, which is kind of an interesting scene. But one thing I would say before I sign out, you know how they've got big bushy eyebrows in this film?
Yeah.
That was an invention of Lynch.
I know, but you also know that Lynch actually hadn't read the books?
Yeah, no, I did hear that, which you do hear though that quite a lot with adaptions. Like Stanley Kubrick, did he not do that for The Shining? He went and just did his own thing.
Yeah, but I'm probably going to get fired from Ghastly Tales, but I didn't really like The Shining.
Oh fucking hell, mate! You just slagged off Star Wars and The Shining.
Yeah, I'm really making myself popular in this podcast, don't I?
Shining's an interesting one amongst it. The rest of us do enjoy it. I think we actually are doing a roundtable discussion about it soon, but I think Mike's got a couple of points that he likes to make about the fact that Stanley Kubrick had never seen a horror film before he watched it, so he committed a lot of like the cardinal sins of horror. in it just as a result, which is quite interesting. But look forward to that in an upcoming video. But yeah, no, I kind of I think this is definitely a guilty pleasure for me, but I would definitely not rate it above Star Wars.
But would you
probably
recommend
the prequels? It's probably better than the prequels.
Would you recommend Dune?
I would say watch it. I think it's definitely one of these movies that's worth watching just for the for the cultural aspects of it. There's definitely bits in it that are worth seeing. I wouldn't say to completely avoid it. I think for me, I would probably put it in the guilty pleasure category.
I don't believe in guilty pleasures, but I would not recommend it unless you are really interested into Lynch's work or into any kind of science fiction you can get your hands on. But
yeah, no, it's difficult. It's because, like we're saying, it's kind of more. I don't know if you would necessarily go out, like if someone says, say, oh, I like Star Trek, you probably wouldn't immediately go, you should watch Dune. Like, they're not, like, in terms of, like, I'm not really sure where this adaptation of Dune sits on the scale of sci-fi.
Me neither, and I think that's one of the most interesting things about the movie. I wouldn't know how to describe it before.
Yeah.
Except as a very quirky field attempt that's fun to watch.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. So, hope you guys have enjoyed that. Feel free to leave comments below if you think we've missed anything out. It's quite possible we have, because there's a lot of kind of slightly weird off-kilter. Oh, one thing actually I would say before we finish, there's one really weird scene again with the Harkonnens where he drinks this juice, which is actually just, he crushes a little creature. And
yeah.
That's fucking mental.
I love that. That was one of the things I really liked.
And it's just like, yeah, that's another kind of one of these little kind of slightly horrific bits that just chucked in to kind of, at this point, the Harkonnens are just way off the caricature scale.
But they could have done more with that if they also had like the same kind of character traits for the good guys.
Yeah. I know, they're all sitting drinking vanilla milkshakes, and the other side, these guys are making smoothies out of tiny little rats and milking apparatus out of cats and rats. But anyway.
I actually wanted the Harkonnens to win because at least they were interesting.
Yeah, no, that's true. But yeah, okay. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this, and like I said, if you do have anything you want to say about it, drop it in a comment below. But this is Mik's first podcast you've done. Yeah. You've done obviously your Tales from the Netherlands before, which I believe you've got one coming up. You were saying?
Yeah, I'm going to do a movie called Deathgasm, and I'm going to share it with Jessica. It was horrible. So you've got that to look forward to.
There you go. But yeah, cool. Thanks for coming on. Well, you'll be back in another time. I don't know why I'm saying that to you. Like, you're a guest. You're a welcome resident of the Ghastly Tales house.
Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate that.
That's all good. So, I don't know. I can't remember if there's any kind of formal goodbyes in June. So I'll just say good journey, which is from He-Man.
Yeah, good journey, and Hill Grey Castle or whatever.
Castle Grayskull.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's cool. Don't worry, I'll edit it out and make it sound like you said it properly. No, it won't. Alright, see you later, guys.
See you later, guys. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's podcast. If you would like to support the free content the Ghastly Tales team produces, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ghastlytales. And if you have any requests for horror topics you would like us to discuss, you can leave a comment below if you're watching this on YouTube, or send us a message on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ghastlytalespresents. Alternatively, you can email us at ghastlytales@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more original horror stories, narrations, films, and podcasts. Unpleasant dreams.